The morning my father spoke her name, I was elbow deep in dishwater, watching a single sparrow pick at the crust of ice along the porch rail. Steam curled up around my wrists. The kitchen smelled of wood smoke and the bacon grease my mother had spooned into the tin by the stove. I did not turn around. I could tell by the shape of his breathing what kind of sentence was coming. My father only sounded that gentle when something had already been settled without me in the room. He said the name like a man reading from a ledger. A family from 2 districts over. Good standing. A boy, no, a man, who had built his own barn before he turned 25. I kept washing the same plate. I had washed it clean a full minute earlier. The water had gone tepid, and my fingertips were beginning to wrinkle. And somewhere underneath all of that, I was remembering 3 faces I had never told him about. 3 boys I had sat beside in the lamplight. 3 voices I had let myself memorize the way a girl memorizes a hymn she is not supposed to hum on a weekday. None of it had ever belonged to me, I realized. Not really. Not in a way that could survive the morning. I'm going to call myself Rebecca for the sake of this telling, because the name my mother chose for me still lives in a community that does not know I speak. I grew up old order in a settlement where a girl's life moved along a track laid down before her grandmother was born. And this channel is the place where the things we were taught to swallow finally get spoken out loud. If you want the truth of how we lived, not the painted barns the tourists photograph from the shoulder of the highway, but the actual weight of it, stay with me. Subscribe before you forget, tap the bell. There is more than one of us, and we are only just learning how to speak. What I'm going to tell you is going to sit in your chest for a long time. If any part of your own childhood was arranged around someone else's certainty, you may recognize the shape of it. Outsiders like to picture our courting as something soft. A boy and a girl walking a dirt lane with the late sun behind them. A shy hand brushing a shy hand near the milk house. That picture is not a lie exactly, but it leaves out the scaffolding. Amish courtship is a structure. It has corners. It has load-bearing walls. And like any structure built by people who fear disorder more than they fear loneliness, every beam is in a place that someone older than you decided on long before you were born. In our district, a girl became visible the season after her baptism. I was 16 the Sunday I knelt on the wood floor of the meeting house and gave my vow. After that, I was no longer just my parents' daughter. I was a future wife waiting to be matched to a future husband. And the whole community had been handed permission to imagine which one. The singings were the first stage. After the long Sunday service, the young people would gather at whichever family had the largest front room or the cleanest barn, and we would sit across from each other at a plank table, boys on one bench, girls on the other, hymn books open, eyes mostly down. Mostly. A girl learned to read a boy's interest in the half-second his glance lingered before he looked back at the page. A boy learned to ask for a buggy ride home the way a man asks a banker for a loan, quietly, with respect, expecting either yes or a polite refusal that would never be discussed again. A ride home was the door. If the door opened, he would come to visit on Sunday evenings, sitting on the good bench in the front room, my mother just a little too loud in the kitchen, my younger brother walking through every 10 minutes for a glass of water he did not need. There was no such thing as alone, but there were degrees of almost alone, and we made our small worlds inside those degrees. The first one came the autumn I turned 17. His name does not matter, but his hands do. He had the kind of hands that did not know where to rest. He would lay them on his knees, then move them to the arms of the chair, then back to his knees, as if his own body were a borrowed coat. He talked about his father's herd. He talked about the price of feed. Once, when I asked him what he had thought about during the long sermon that morning, he blinked at me like I had asked him to translate the wind. He gave me 3 rides. He visited 4 times. On the 5th Sunday, the lamp stayed unlit in the front room, and my mother did not say a single word about it while she set the table. A week later, my cousin mentioned, while we were stringing beans on the porch, that he had been seen taking a girl home from the singing in the next district. My cousin said it the way women in our world say everything that matters, sideways, eyes on the work, voice flat enough that you had to lean in to hear what was underneath. He had not told me. He had not needed to. The silence was the message, and I had been raised fluent in it. If you want a deeper look at what is hidden in the daily life of a community like the one I came from, The full guide is linked below. Subscribe. Like this if it has moved you. Hit the bell. These stories cost something to tell, and they only travel as far as you carry them. The second one came the following summer. He was loud in the way some Amish men are loud when they are still young enough to believe they will always be young. He laughed without checking the room first. Among us, that was almost reckless. Joy that announces itself is suspected of pride, and pride is what the Ordnung was built to file down. But his laugh was honest, and the first time I heard it, in the lane behind the schoolhouse, where a group of us had stopped to look at a fawn caught in the fence wire, I felt something in my shoulders come loose that I had not known was tight. He visited 7 Sunday evenings in a row. He sat forward in the chair, not back. He listened the way a person listens when listening is something he has decided to do, not something he is enduring. We talked about doubts. Not big ones, not the kind that get you called before the bishop. Small, careful ones. Whether the Lord minded if you sang a hymn faster than the lead singer said it. Whether it was vanity to want your bread to come out of the oven looking like the loaves in your aunt's kitchen rather than your mother's. We were practicing, I think, the harder questions we were not yet brave enough to ask each other out loud. My mother began to clean the front room on Saturday afternoons in a way she had not cleaned it before. She did not mention him. She did not have to. The kettle whistled a little brighter on the evenings he was expected. What I did not see was my father at the kitchen table on a Wednesday night, a piece of paper in front of him, talking low with my uncle. I did not see the deacon stop my father after the next service and stand with him by the buggies a long time. I did not know that the second young man's older brother had once been put under the ban for 2 months, years ago, for refusing to sell a tractor that the church had said he could not keep. I did not know that in my father's reckoning, a family's softness in one generation became the seed of a daughter's grief in the next. In the second week of November, the bench in the front room sat empty on a Sunday night for the first time in 2 months. The lamp was lit. My mother had baked. My father read the German Bible in his chair, the page turning every so often, and I sat across from a place where someone was supposed to be and was not. I waited a week before I asked. My father lowered the Bible to his lap. He looked at me the way a man looks at a horse he has decided not to buy, kindly, without regret. He said the family was not the right fit for ours. He said I would understand when I was older. He said it was his place to weigh these things, and mine to trust that the weighing had been done in love. I did not cry in front of him. I cried later, in the loft, into the corner of a quilt my grandmother had pieced before I was born. My grandmother had married a man chosen for her too. The quilt knew. I pressed my face into it and felt, for the first time in my life, that the women in my family had been handing this same grief down through their hands for longer than any of us had bothered to count. The third one came in April, when the mud was still deep in the lane, and the redbuds along the creek were just beginning to bruise the woods with color. He was 22. I was 18. He was a furniture maker, apprenticed to his uncle, with the kind of forearms that come from planing oak by hand for 10 hours at a stretch. He drove an old courting buggy that he had rebuilt himself, and the wheels were so true you could not hear them on a smooth road. The first night he visited, he did not bring me anything. No small box of store candy, no jar of his mother's preserves, none of the gentle bribes the others had carried in like apology. He sat down across from me in the front room. He looked at me for a long moment, not in a way that was forward, but in a way that was actually seeing, and he said, "Rebecca, what do you turn over in your mind when nobody is watching you?" I did not have an answer ready. No one had ever opened a conversation with me by reaching for the part of me I kept hidden even from myself. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, and I felt my throat close, and I felt it open, and I felt him wait. He was unhurried in a way I had not known a young man could be. The clock on the wall ticked. The lamp wick crackled once. Outside, a barn owl called from the woodlot. I told him finally that I thought about whether the Lord knew our names the way our mothers did, by the sound of our footsteps on the porch boards, or whether he only knew us the way the bishop did, by the columns of our families in the church book. He nodded slowly. He said he had wondered the same thing, and that he had decided, in the absence of an answer, to live as though both were true. He came back the next Sunday, and the next. The hours stretched. My little sister fell asleep on the bench beside the wood stove one evening, and we did not notice until my mother came in to lift her up. I had been talking about my grandmother's quilt. He had been listening as if quilts could save a person, which in some houses they have. By the time the hay was up and the second cutting was drying in the field, I had begun to picture a kitchen that was mine and his. Not in detail, not yet. Just the shape of a window, and someone moving behind me through it. Easy in the room, easy with me. It was the first picture of my future I had ever drawn for myself, without first asking permission of the people who would have to approve the frame. My mother saw it on me. I caught her looking at me once across the breakfast table, with something in her face I did not recognize at first. Later I understood. It was hope. And underneath the hope, a fear she did not let me see clearly until much later, when she could not protect me from it anymore. My father saw it too. He saw it differently. If you have made it this far, please consider subscribing. These are not easy stories to put into words, and your being here is part of what makes the telling possible. The full guide to the world I came out of is linked below for anyone who wants the longer answer. It was a Tuesday evening in late August when my father asked me to come into the front room. Tuesday, not Sunday. That detail told me everything before he said a single word. Sunday is when the world begins. Tuesday is when it is closed. He sat in his chair. He had folded the newspaper in his lap, although he was not reading it. My mother was in the kitchen, but she had stopped moving. I could hear the absence of her, which was louder than her footsteps would have been. She was listening with her whole body the way only women in our world know how to listen, present and unseen at the same time. My father said the name of a man I had spoken to perhaps 4 times in my life. A widower, 31 years old, 200 acres free and clear on the north side of the ridge. A house he had built with his own hands the year his first wife died in childbed. A reputation in the district that the ministers spoke of with the small, careful approval reserved for men who never gave them anything to discuss. He said that this man had come to him 3 weeks ago in private and had asked his permission to court me. He said he had taken the matter to prayer. He said he had also taken it to the deacon, and to my mother's brother, and to his own conscience, and that all 4 had pointed in the same direction. He said the furniture maker, kind as he was, came from a family whose finances were unsteady, and that the widower could offer me a life of provision and respect, and a place in the community that no daughter of his could safely refuse without grieving her own future. He said he had given his word. A lamp on the table between us threw long shadows up the wall. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I asked him, and I was surprised by how level my voice came out, whether I had a choice. He took a long breath. He said, of course I did. He said no Amish woman was ever forced. He said the Lord did not honor a vow made under compulsion. But he said all of that the way a man recites a verse that he has decided is true in principle and beside the point in fact. Behind his words sat the unspoken weight that had governed every Sunday of my life. To say no was to say no not only to a man but to a father, a community, a covenant, a baptism, and beyond all of that, to the ban itself, the closing door, the meals eaten at a separate table, the mother who could no longer pass me the bread. I was 18. I had been baptized for 2 years. I had been raised to believe that the shape of obedience was the shape of love. I said yes. I did not say it with joy. I said it the way a person signs a paper she has not been allowed to read. My mother did not come out of the kitchen for a long time. When she finally did, she put her hand on the back of my neck the way she had when I was a small child with a fever. And she did not say anything. And she did not have to. Because her hand was apologizing for a whole century of women who had not been able to apologize for anything. I want to tell you what happened after because the part most people skip is the part that actually matters. The man I married was not unkind. He was not cruel. He was, exactly as my father had assessed, steady. He worked from before light to after dark. He prayed at the table with a deep, settled voice that other men in the district admired. He never raised a hand. He never raised his voice. He was a stranger I made coffee for every morning of my life for 11 years. And slowly, the strangeness wore down into a kind of polite, mutual carefulness that we both, I think, mistook for peace. There were mornings in that house, especially the first winter, when I would stand at the kitchen window over a sink that was not my mother's sink, and I would press the heels of my hands against the edge of the counter, and I would try to remember the lamp going low in my parents' front room. I would try to remember the question the furniture maker had asked me: "What do you turn over in your mind when nobody is watching you?" The answer had changed. I turned over the question of whether the girl who had been asked that question was someone I would ever be again, or whether she had been folded up and put away on a high shelf in a house I no longer lived in, the way my mother put away the Christmas linens after Epiphany. I did not leave for a long time. Leaving in our world is not a door, it is a cliff. There is no soft way down. When I finally went, years later, with two small children whose names I will protect from this telling, I did not go because I had stopped loving the people I left behind. I went because I had begun to understand that the love I had been given, real as it was, had been shaped like a cage, and that the bars of it had been made by people who believed they were building me a house. A counselor in the outside world, the first one I ever sat across from, gave me a word I had never been allowed to hold in my mouth: agency. The right to be the one who decides, not the one who consents to a decision already made, the one who decides. I sat in her small, warm office, with a box of tissues between us and a clock that did not tick the way our clock at home had ticked, and I cried for a girl at a kitchen window with her hands in cooling dishwater, who had not known that the word for what was missing even existed. I do not tell this story to condemn my father. My father loved me with every tool his world had ever placed in his hand. He did not have the word agency either. No one had given it to him. He had been raised by his own father to believe that the highest form of fatherly love was the careful, prayerful arranging of his daughter's future. And he did that work the way he did every other work of his life, with seriousness and with faith and with calloused, honest hands. The grief I carry is not that he failed to love me. It is that the only love he had been taught was a love that required me to disappear. If you grew up somewhere your yes had already been written down before you learned to spell your own name, I want you to hear something. You were not ungrateful for noticing the walls. You were not faithless for wanting a window. The hunger you felt was not a sin. It was a compass, and it was pointing you toward a country you had every right to be a citizen of. The community I came from gave me real things. It gave me a grandmother whose quilts still keep my children warm. It gave me the smell of a barn at 5 a.m. in February, when the cows breathe out clouds and the world is so quiet you can hear the milk fall into the pail. It gave me a faith that I still carry, although I carry it now in my own two hands and not in the hands of the men who used to hold it for me. I will not pretend those things were nothing. They were the marrow of me. But the voice I speak with now, this one, the one telling you this, it was not given to me. I had to walk into a long, dark hallway and find it for myself, and I had to pay for it with almost everything I had ever called home. I would walk that hallway again. I would walk it tomorrow. If any piece of this has touched something you thought you had buried, I want you to know there is a whole shelf of these stories waiting for you on this channel. The full guide to the world behind the postcards is linked below. Subscribe if you have not. Hit the bell, leave a word in the comments, even just your first name, so I know who is out there listening. There are women who have not told their stories yet, who are watching the numbers under these videos to see whether it is safe to speak. Until I see you again, hold your own yes carefully. It is the only one you will ever have, and nobody, no matter how much they love you, has the right to spend it for you.